Do I have to discuss all the transfers on this channel? Or can I just be biased? I don't like this one. Mohamed Kudus is having his medical today ahead of a £55 million transfer from West Ham United to Spurs. However, we're not going to discuss that till, as I always say, the second half of the video, the final third of the video. We're going to discuss it as little as possible. I want to start with the Morgan Gibbs-White one. A, because it's the big one. B, because I'm more interested by that one. And C, to avoid me being annoyed for the entire duration of today's video. But this one's coming from David Ornstein. He's reporting that Spurs want Nottingham Forest's Morgan Gibbs-White. No transfer fee attached to this transfer rumour. However, we like David Ornstein on this channel. This would be a big move. This would be a bold one. This would be bigger than Kudus going from West Ham to Spurs. And I think this would be an ambitious transfer as well. And I don't think Nottingham Forest can go ahead with this one. I will say that. I think they need to price Tottenham out of it. However, because he's only got 2 years left on his contract, it puts him in a bit of a difficult position. And I think had Spurs approached Nottingham Forest a month ago, there might have been a negotiation there. Because coming out of the season, I think it was fair to say there was maybe an expectation that Manchester City would move for Morgan Gibbs-White. Instead, they opted for Cherky and Reinders instead, and they didn't go for Gibbs-White. And I believe part of that reason is because of the bulky transfer fee that Nottingham Forest were looking for, a minimum 70 million for him. Understandably so, justifiably so. They are the club that's looking to keep a hold of one of their best players. So they're well within their right to ask for anything. And just because the buying club doesn't want to pay it, it doesn't mean he's not worth that. That's what he's worth to Nottingham Forest. But had Spurs approached Nottingham Forest, I say a month ago, even 2 weeks ago, they might have got a different response. There might have been a negotiation there to be had and a transfer there to be conducted. But I think it's changed now. And I think it's changed because of Newcastle United going after Anthony Elanga. And as I say always stress, it's quite a new channel, but as I have mentioned it a couple of times, us as football fans can sometimes mistake making transfers as being successful and spending money as being ambitious and successful. But actually there's a lot said for just retaining your best players, and that's why I pointed to Bournemouth signing a new contract with Semenyo, with Everton signing a new contract with Jared Vanthwaite. These are huge deals in the transfer window. They just haven't moved clubs. But will Bournemouth sign a better winger than Semenyo this summer? Probably not. Will Everton sign a better defender than Jared Vanthwaite? I'm quite confident they won't. And Nottingham Forest have done a couple of their own as well with Nico Williams. Fantastic. Get him signed up to a new contract. Brilliant. Aina as well is someone else that's, don't know if he's signed it yet, but supposed to be signing. He's certainly in talks to sign a new contract at the City Ground. Nuno signed a new contract. These are good moves. Retaining your important people is still a success. It doesn't have to be measured on which players you bring in. Keeping them is just as, actually, arguably even more important, depending on who it is, of course. But if Nottingham Forest were to come out the transfer window and the only player they've sold that they perhaps would have preferred not to is Elanga, I would chalk that up as a success. If they are able to retain Milankovic, Murillo, the fullbacks as discussed, Elliot Anderson in particular, they were able to keep him and then strengthen like they have with the likes of Jair, there you go, Jair Cunha and Igor Jesus coming in. That's a huge window for them. Gibbs-White's going to test them. Spurs coming for Gibbs-White will test them. Because I think losing one important player in Elanga, and I think it's a reasonable transfer fee for both Newcastle and Nottingham Forest. I don't think it's offensive to either of them. But you don't want to be losing two. I don't think you want to lose Gibbs-White as well. Now, I expect the transfer fee or the requested transfer fee to be 70 million plus, and I'm not sure I can see Tottenham sanctioning that. However, 25 years old, homegrown, he's got that leadership, he's got that creativity, he's a top talent. And within the article it said that Thomas Frank is a big fan of Gibbs-White. Understandable, why? Who isn't? I think, right? I think I'd expect most football fans to rate Gibbs-White. But this is something Thomas Frank wasn't afforded at Brentford. He wasn't allowed to just go, I want him and I want him, go make it happen. That wasn't how Brentford went around their transfer recruitment. That wasn't in line with the DNA of that club. So Thomas Frank could admire as much people as he wanted, but ultimately he did not have the final say. I imagine he would have had some say in the player recruitment side of things, and if he wanted, or if he admired, as it is, a player like Gibbs-White. But Brentford were never going to start spending 60, 70 million on a player. So it would have been almost like Thomas Frank's almost got this ability now to go to Spurs and start to put together almost like a bit of a dream team. It's almost like Thomas Frank's playing FIFA if he starts bringing in players like Gibbs-White. He's been given the controller. It's like, well, sign who you want. Who do you want? Who would you like? Oh, well, I really like, oh, we'll try and go get him for you. Well, hang on a minute. This is new. I didn't have this at Brentford. Then we look at it from, so the Nottingham Forest perspective, it's a difficult one. If he had like a 3-4 years on his contract, I think Nottingham Forest could easily say 80 million or whatever and just price them out of it completely. But they have to be a bit sensible and take it into consideration. They'll know if Gibbs-White's likely to sign a new contract or not at that club. They will know what the deal is. And if they're getting the noise that he's perhaps not going to put pen to paper, then they might have to cash in. It won't be cheap. And I think this is where not quite getting Champions League football could really be harming Nottingham Forest, because had they got top 5 and got Champions League football, financially they'd be in such a strong position right now. And also the lure for Gibbs-White to go to Spurs wouldn't be as much, because at the moment, and I know people say, why would he go there? They finished 10 places behind Nottingham Forest. Factually true. But is anyone expecting Tottenham to finish 17th again? I'm quite confident Spurs will be in and around the top 8. Right? Do I think they'll get Champions League football? Maybe if they have a good season, others mess up, they might sneak in there. But I don't expect them being the bottom half next season. And Frank is a fantastic appointment for them. And they've got a really good set of players at that club already. And this is where you take the Tottenham. So my point is, the lure of going to Spurs right now for Gibbs-White, it's not, 7th in the league and 17th in the league. That's not really the comparison here. It's Conference League football, Champions League football. Now, they may get promoted, depending on Crystal Palace, but still Europa League, Champions League. Plus, as I keep on stressing, and I feel like I'm the only one doing this, admittedly, I don't scour the internet for other people saying the same. Let me know if you agree on this. I still think Thomas Tuchel can be a problem for clubs if he's going to force / strongly suggest to players like Gibbs-White, you're going to want to be playing Champions League football. Now, he's got into the England squad, so it would suggest that he might be all right playing for Nottingham Forest in the Conference League. But if Tuchel's going to put an emphasis on playing Champions League football, it may make players like Gibbs-White think, hang on a minute, maybe I'm better off moving to someone like Spurs. So I'm playing at that level, therefore I'm in the England team. It's a World Cup year. Gibbs-White himself has to get this right. If he decides to stay or decides to go, he's got to get it right. Because whatever it is, whatever he needs to do between now and then to get on that plane, he is capable. He's got the talent, and he's capable of doing it performance-wise at Nottingham Forest. It's just a case of if Tuchel is okay with that, or if he's going to play silly buggers and get involved and start forcing players to move, which I hope he doesn't. I think it would be bad for the Premier League, because I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is clubs standing up to the Premier League cartel a little bit and saying, well, you can have him, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. Or you want him, you're not having him, go away. You look at Newcastle with Isak, for example. The media have been doing the pressure thing. They've been trying to almost constantly speaking about it. Hell, I remember a Newcastle game last season, I watched them play, and Isak scored. The pundit was like, oh, that's why Arsenal are interested in him. Just scored a goal for Newcastle, mate. Why are you bringing Arsenal? But that was the peer pressure you get from the Premier League cartel. And I feel like the 14 have been standing up to the 6 a little bit. And I hope that continues. But I think if Tuchel starts dictating that you need to be playing top-level football as in Champions League to get into his squad, that's going to put a little bit of pressure on the England players anyway. In regards to the Spurs perspective here, it's hard not to look at Damsgaard at Brentford and how Frank evolved Brentford's tactics last season because of the lack of Ivan Toney / Igor Thiago being out for the season, and having Wissa up front, a completely different profile of striker. He had to evolve, he had to adapt, went to a 4-2-3-1 rather than a bit of a 3-5-2. And it made Damsgaard was key. He was key to the switch, but he also benefited from the switch. So it's hard not to look at Damsgaard and think, hey, once Morgan Gibbs-White to be doing what Damsgaard did at Spurs. But you look at the Spurs team with Kulusevski, Maddison, especially Kulusevski now. Tottenham are going after Kudus, because if Kudus goes there, essentially on the right they've got Brennan Johnson and Kudus. In the middle they have Maddison, Kulusevski. Over on the left you've got Odeber, Matthias Tell, I guess, can play down there. Son, Timo Werner, is he still there? Right? Has he left yet? I think he's still a Spurs player. Pretty sure he is. Mikey Moore. There's a lot of attacking talent in that Tottenham. Richarlison, although a striker can play out wide, there's a lot of attacking talent in that Tottenham team. I'd imagine one or two may be leaving, but I can see why Spurs would want him. 25 years, good age, homegrown, fantastic footballer. It's just quite pricey. I think if Nottingham Forest price him 70 million or so and stick to it, which, they priced Alanga at 70 and they've ended up taking 55, haven't they? But if they stick to it with Gibbs-White, I think they'll be able to fend off Spurs. It's just what's going on behind the scenes. The one thing they have to consider, I guess, is what's Gibbs-White worth next summer? If he's only got a year left on his contract, what's he worth then? I would suggest that they could still get 50 million for him next summer. So is it worth cashing in now for that extra 10, 15 million they may get from Spurs today? Or are you better off having him for another season, having that European campaign, and then taking less money, but winning the Conference League? Nottingham Forest should be favourites to win that tournament, and I hope they do win it. And my prediction is, I think Nottingham Forest will win the Conference League next season. They should do. They'll have a better chance of doing it with Gibbs-White. Saying that, though, the recruitment's been bang on the last couple of seasons. The recruitment's been brilliant. So armed with 120 million from Alanga and Gibbs-White, you'd fancy them to bring in adequate replacements. Now, I'm talking of Kudus to Spurs. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I understand when people point to Alanga and they point to Cunha and Bomo's rumoured price tag and say, well, 55 is fair for what you're getting. And I'm guilty of looking at the player Kudus could be rather than the player that Kudus has been. But I think it's because I think Kudus would be a better player by simply just moving position. I don't think it's a difficult fix to improve Mohamed Kudus next season, regardless of where he is. We've been playing him on the left. He's not suited to the left. I think his best position's out on the right, which is where we played Jared Bowen. Actually, most of the time under Potter, we haven't even had someone playing on the right. We've played Kudus and Bowen up front. Played two strikers with no strikers, if that makes sense. So I'm a bit disappointed he's leaving, because I was buzzing when we signed him. I absolutely loved him in an Ajax shirt. I haven't been as excited to sign a player as I have since Mohamed Kudus. I think in his first season he was fantastic. The second season, the one that's just finished, not very good. 5 goals, 8 goals and assists combined. It's not impressive, is it? But I think he's been mismanaged, and I think there's a top player there. And what frustrates me most is I think he'll be a success at Tottenham. I think Thomas Frank will be a really good manager for them. And I think he'll be a really good player for Thomas Frank as well. And I think that's what is frustrating, because I feel like I'm almost destined to witness him go on and become the player I thought he could be in a Spurs shirt. We, West Ham, have made it clear for quite some time that we need to sell before we buy, which is a horrendous policy to have in place, and it's a horrendous situation to find yourselves in. But it's the years of mismanagement coming back to bite us in the arse in one go here. So we need to sell Kudus or a other player in order to bring players in. We shouldn't be in this situation, and that's what I'm most angry about in regards to this Kudus deal. It's not even necessarily Kudus leaving or going to Spurs. It's the fact that we have to sell Kudus to Spurs because there's no one else bidding for him except Tottenham, and we have to cash in on him in order to buy players. It's a bad situation to be in, no matter which football club you are, by the way. I'm removing the West Ham side of things here. It doesn't matter who you are. You go into a summer transfer window and you need to sell players before you can buy players. That's bad. Now, if you brought 3 players in and spent 50 million and then you said, right, now it's 1 out, 1 in policy, that's understandable. You've just had a bit of a spend up. We've literally spent nothing. Todibo, yes, because he was on loan with an obligation, so we've had to pay out for that this summer. But you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, Kudus is going to be a Tottenham player in the next 24 hours or so. Gibbs-White, I don't think this one will happen. I think Nottingham Forest will price them out. But I do believe the interest, and if it did happen, I think Tottenham, annoyingly, would have 2 top new players and 2 top signings.